It's great to see so many people here. It's obviously because we've got a great man getting up to talk to us. It's good to see some of his partners in crime back there, but Grant Furzer, and Bruce Lear, and even Ray Kenny was in on the job there. It's wonderful to have all you people along. It's a great turnout. It's wonderful. We've also got Barry Clark here. He was the motivator in some ways to getting Sam to do this presentation. For those who don't know, Barry's actually member number 1 of the HSRCA, and it's also good we've got George Goodyear here. He's something of a Sam Johnson protege when it comes to fiberglass work. George is member number 2. Sadly, we don't have member number 3, Ian Pope, around these days, but it's the way it goes. So I won't say a lot more. We'll get young Sam up to have a word with us.
Thank you, Eric. Well, I've got to do those words justice, haven't I? So that might be a bit difficult. But anyway, thank you, Scott. Okay. It's almost like returning home, having been an early past committee member. Is that better? Yeah, that's better. Of this great club, and it's great to see some familiar, but I must say, rather older faces than I remember from my memory. Firstly, I would like to introduce you to some special guests. Well, actually, Gary's already done it, and that's Bruce Lear and Grant Furzer and Ray Kenny, all dear friends of mine and who featured somewhat in the following story. I do have apologies from Moss Anglers, who was going to be here tonight, but family commitments have prevented that. But however, he passed his regards. Stay down. Is this part of the floor?
You're down there.
I do acknowledge HSRCA stalwart Gary Simpson, who rang and suggested I give this talk. And most importantly, I must thank Barry Clark, who's the founding member of the HSRCA, for going through my disorganised collection of photographs, presenting them in a correct form and writing the basic text for this presentation. I can say without a doubt, without his enthusiasm, this presentation wouldn't have taken place. So, thank you, Barry. At any time, feel free to ask any questions. So I'll start off. So I suppose every car enthusiast has a story to tell on how he became interested in cars. And like many, my introduction was through dinky toys, particularly racing cars, and running them down a discarded piece of galvanised house guttering. At an early age, I developed a medical problem which precluded me from sport and swimming. And my father, who at the time had no real interest in cars, fostered my increasing passion by taking my mates and I to motor race meetings at Mount Druitt, Parramatta Park, and I think at Bathurst at one stage. We went to all the old meetings, even on the old original airstrip at Mount Druitt, where we went up one side and down the other. And Parramatta Park, which was actually a run through the roads, the inside roads in Parramatta Park. Now the track still exists there, but yeah, it was rather different in those days. Anyhow, I was also fortunate in having a teacher who was a car enthusiast, and I was enthralled with his stories of Ferraris and Maseratis and Jaguars and what else have you, and the old motorsport magazines he used to lend me to read. I think on there's one of our first efforts with cars. We used to have a common interest in model aeroplanes, but that sort of got hit on the head rather because of noise restrictions and getting thrown off every local park around the place. And we actually built a model scale electric type track before. Well, we'd never heard of scale electric, and we dreamed this up ourselves. So it basically is the same as a scale electric car, but larger. They were about a foot long, and that track was about 120 feet around, I think, I remember. It was out in the weather. The track was actually concrete. That was the first track which was made out of masonite on the ground. Yeah, and the second track is the one we built out of concrete. And we used to run it out in the rain with 240 volts. We're all still here until the time.
It'd be good in the wet.
Yeah, but anyhow, we built them. We had all these models and we raced them around this track. I guess we were about 18 years of age, and at that point we were members of the Manly Ring Sporting Car Club. And after fiddling around with fiberglass a little, we decided to build a sports car body for our own use. We didn't have any real thought to selling anything. And the design was inspired by a 1/6 scale version of Ferrari Monza. That's it there, which was built a couple of years beforehand. I built it, and it was my first attempt actually playing around with fiberglass. We decided to use that as a basis and scaled it up to, that eventually became the Milano. The finish, we built it, and the finished car, I think from memory, I think we were driving along Sydney Road, weren't we? And somebody overtook us and pushed us into the gutter and jumps out, and it was the name of Doug Bain, I think, who was the editor of Sports Car World. He wanted to know all about it and everything else, and anyhow that led to an article in Sports Car World, and before we knew where we were, I think we had about 20 orders for these things, and we hadn't built it. We very quickly formed a business, and JWF Glass Fibre Industry formed in 1959. The founders were myself, the J, Jeff Williams, who was not here tonight, he lives in Melbourne, and Brad Fursby, he's not, he is the F. So we released the Milano range of bodies designed particularly to rebody aging Austin 7s and MGs that abounded, and at that point in time were very cheap to acquire. The shell came with a moulded firewall, double skin doors with a hinge at the bottom, bonnet that had a rigid tonneau cover, streamlined headrest, and bonded in mounting brackets to accept the body of the chassis at 10 points. Optional extras were a choice of windscreens, aero screens and headlight tunnels. The cost was £125, and I note in our original brochures, freight to Melbourne was a whole £11. Yeah, how things have changed. The first body was designed for the long Austin 7 of 1935 to 38, and the body shell was lengthened and widened to suit other and bigger chassis. All in all, we built about 200 of these cars. We never ever kept any accurate thing on, but we reckon that's about what we did. About 50% of them went on Austin 7s, and others went on Fords and MGs, all sorts of things. The first body was built for, actually that one is not the first one, that belonged to Lloyd Thompson, who was a ex-HSRCA member. That there is the second one we built, which is Jeff Williams. It was a J2 chassis with a Bullman motor, actually. And the first one, of course, was built for Grant and was on a £15 Austin 7. Very expensive piece of gear. The most notable competition car was the number 2 body we built, which was raced successfully by Brucey Lear, and that was a J2 chassis with a TC 1500 motor in it, and at one time it held every New South Wales track record for under 1500 sports cars.
Yeah, Bruce, you're young then, mate.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's taken at Warwick Farm. Yeah. He was young then. Anyhow, that car was sold to, Bruce sold the car to Los Angeles when Bruce finished with it and bought a Cooper Climax, and it ended a long and reliable career in historic racing with John Scott, who I believe just sold the car recently to Western Australia. There's the car as John Scott owned it recently, yeah. That's a photo of the three partners, and I think it's Bruce's car's there, and the other one's a prototype Italia which we built, which is on the TC. The other one's a TD with an Italia, and that's Jeff Williams' little J2 with a Hillman motor in it. Anyhow, in 1960 we introduced the Italia, which is a significantly larger than the Milano. That's a photo of the plate after a mould had been removed on it. It's obviously knocked around a lot because it was only made out of plaster. It gave a general idea, right? We didn't actually have too many early photographs of these things, and that was just one which we had. That was the prototype, which was on the TC. But it was inspired by, generally I suppose, by the Ferrari GT 250 in a sort of a way. And the body, it was suitable for singers and Austin A40s, MGs, Austin Healey 100s, Triumphs. Nova Engineering also made a bespoke space frame chassis. There were about 30 of those from memory built, so not all. I think there was about 5 Notas, would that be right, Grant? Something like that? About 5 with Nota chassis in it?
I don't remember.
Yeah, roughly something like that.
Sam, that's the chassis that went under the Pronto for Warren Blomfield, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a one-off, but that wasn't, yeah, the others were slightly smaller than that. But that car, yeah, Warren Blomfield's one of them, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, there it is there, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was taken when the car was first put together up at Bathurst, so yeah, that was actually a fairly quick car.
Yes.
In its day, in fact, well, before Warren had that, he had one of the ex-Kangaroo Aston Martin DB3Ss, and that thing went harder than what the DB3S went, so it was quite a gadget. It did lack reliability. In fact, I remember the first race meeting we went to, and it went about 3 laps and used to conk out. And they found out it had a blocked hole in the petrol filler cap. It was starving for juice, so things have happened. Anyway, in 1960, well, that car actually, Warren's car actually had a Repco head in it and the Nota chassis. That's another one, I believe it's on a Healey chassis, and has a 186 motor in it. It runs quite regularly in the Target Tasmania. In about 1960, the first Milano GT was built up, and it was actually, that's the body, it was actually fabricated in pieces. It wasn't, it was just an ordinary little open Milano body, which we drafted a hardtop which we were making for Sprites actually. We drafted part of the hardtop onto it, and sort of, that's how it turned out. Well, in that gullwing doors, it wasn't a very practical sort of thing, and it remained a one-off car. Yeah, there's some photos of it when it was finished.
Tilly.
The attractive lady there was actually Tilly Pillane, who's in her younger days. So, yeah, Bruce was one. In 1961, we redesigned the body without the gull-wing doors and made our own tubular chassis, and that's thus the Milano GT, well, which is later called the Mark I, was born. And that's photos of the prototype there. That's a photo of Carol and I think. That's taken by Amaru Park before they built the pits. That's the road going along the back of that.
Looks like it.
Holmes Park, yeah. Anyway, 2 competition cars were built with Holden engines, and MTC gearboxes originally. And they were, the original Malays, and they were raced by Bruce Lear and myself. We enjoyed reasonable success. Other notable GT, that's actually a picture of, that's Frank Berryman's old Eton. Keith Berry, yeah. Other notable GT cars in competitions were those of Dick Willis and John Wright. I don't know whether there are any photos of them here, but I acknowledge they're both here tonight too. So, well, Dick Willis is not, but John is, yeah. That shows actually me looting Bruce at Oran Park, but I can assure you that that was not the usual order of things. Bruce was by far the better driver, and I think actually just before that photograph was taken, I think Bruce lost it going round a corner, and I darted up inside. I think if you really look closely at the mudguard, the back mudguard on the back of Bruce's car, which is the second car there, you can see where the bit's dangling off where I whacked it. I can't remember exactly what happened, but it wasn't the usual order of things. Bruce was by far the better driver. I guess there were about 30 odd of those body and chassis units were built. We don't know really what happened to them, or because we never had much to do with them after we sold them. We never finished them. People put their own engines in them, so we wouldn't really know. There are other photos of competition. I think that's Bruce's car. He thinks taken at Silverdale. Yeah. The other one is, I think that's got a zipper motor in it, and that's down at Collingwood. Who was it? I don't know. South Australia? Not too sure. Yeah. It's just photographs that were in my books. Yeah. That, of course, is the Milano, which belongs to, it's a Milano which actually, we actually lengthened it 4 inches in the nose, and the chassis, we didn't assemble it, and it was purchased, I think Paul Manton owns it now in the club, but it was purchased by, I've got no idea, they were engineers that worked at Chrysler at the time down in, and they used a slant 6 Valiant motor in it, but it was upright. It was rather an interesting sort of a gadget. So that's another photo of the Milano. Anyhow, as I said, there were about 30 of those built. Many of them survive today and are racing in historic races. There are 3, I believe, active in England and still doing quite well. There's a photo of 2 of them. I think that's Ned's old car and Scotty Whittaker's old car. Brands Hatch, I think. Is that right, Ned? In the early 1960s, Brad Furzer and Jeff Williams left the company, and with the interest in car production tailing off, I then focused on commercial and industrial products, and was well and truly out of cars at that point and very busy. So in 1968, in collaboration with Bruce, the Milano GT2 emerged. There were 2 built and then another one later on, which made 3, but they were not for general sale because it really didn't lend itself the way we built it, it was all, it was a space frame, but it was semi-monocoque in a way. The way the body was fitted to it was far too time-consuming and everything to even think about making them and trying to sell them. They were generally regarded as reasonable-looking sort of things, and they actually started off, the styling of them was rather in the mould of, well, we took design cues off a Lola and a Ford GT, Lola GT, but we front-engined them. That's how it started and developed a long way from there. The chassis and suspension design is attributed to Bruce, and we were very much influenced by the concept and performance of the Lotus Super 7. At the time, Mossy Angus, the other mate, had a Lotus Super 7, and we can remember, particularly at Oran Park where we ran, not ran the Mark 1s, that the Lotus Super 7 on a good day was not far behind a car like a Lotus 23B, which was a much more sophisticated sort of gadget. So that sort of impressed us, and believe it or not, I guess the GT2 was actually an overgrown, the concept of it was an overgrown Lotus Super 7 with a Holden 179 motor in it and other Holden mechanicals, plus an all enveloping coupe body. It developed from there. It was, in the end, it wound up actually a semi-monocoque. The whole body was, I think, in about 15 or 16 panels in total, and it was all glued onto the chassis, and you couldn't remove it. And it was, that's why it was, you wouldn't have ever bothered making them to sell them. The lightweight space frame was constructed actually with design cues. A lot of the design cues came from the Matic SR3 and SR4, which we bodied in our factory. Engines were Holden 179. The gear boxes originally were MG magnet with close ratio gears. That's a photo actually of Moss and Bruce and Ross Pond actually. Here that's taken on Ellevold at Oran Park. Yeah. So the two cars we had were driven by Moss and Bruce, and they appeared at most New South Wales meetings with many successes, and seldom finished out of place. And it's an interesting aside that in those days, I suppose more than anything else, we ran them at Oran Park, and particularly the day and night meetings, and in those days they paid prize money. Believe it or not, we actually ran those cars for 2 years. Did not stick our hand in our pocket for 1 cent. Every expense came out of the kitty. We just had a kitty, and all the prize money went into the kitty. We were very rarely out of the money. And I remember it used to pay blow-ups, which were rare, but it paid for engines, it paid for tyres, which were I suppose the biggest consumable, plus fuel, plus anything else. Entry forms, the whole lot, and we had a dirty great big nosh up at the end of the year. You wouldn't do that today. It's really something. The third car was actually built for Frank Matic's cousin, and after an eventful career, it's now the car that's owned by Scotty Whittaker. And it participates, of course, in historic racing. The three cars, well, Andrew's got one, plus the remains, I think, of the ex-Mossy Angus one, the one that I owned. Still, so the three of them still do exist. It was something. So that actually marked the end of our JWF automotive products. Because in 1974 our two cars were sold to Western Australia. I suppose time progressed, the cars weren't, other things were going faster then and then, and we had an offer to sell them, so we sold them. So that's they went. We're not exactly sure of the numbers, but in the end, we reckon about 300 JWF bodies and kits were built, and I'm pleased to say there's still many about today. The business expanded, and in the mid-70s I developed an interest in Ferrari road cars, and at various times owned 2 Dino 246s and a 308 GT4. The reason I mention this and show that, and this photo is included, because it gave rise to my next project. The business was sold in 1979 when I entered retirement, but I was still, I suppose, hankered for a project and started to think about actually building a Maserati 250F replica. People often say, why did you ever bother to do these things? And I guess I mentioned to a few people, and you'd see the looks on their faces, and they thought I was crazy. So I thought, I'll sit out the proof. Well, they probably think I am crazy. So yeah, that's how it sort of started. But anyhow, I thought of building a 250F replica and using the engine out of a Maserati Sebring. But at the time I couldn't work out a suitable final drive and never took the matter any further. And now it's all too late anyway. I figured it out, but it's all too late. I'm a great thinker. I always had a passion for GP cars of the 1950s, particularly Italian. And at this time, Willie Green in the JCB-owned Dino Ferrari Grand Prix car was conquering everything in historic racing in the UK. And the magazines constantly featured write-ups and photos of this car. And I was struck by the similarity of the engine and drivetrain of my Dino road car. That's hence why the photos included. And at that time I actually had the Dino in pieces scattered all over my workshop. I decided to rebuild it, and that took 6 years. A slow rebuild, and the bits were all there. And when these articles came out on the Grand Prix Dino, and the thing was cleaning up in England, so there was a lot of information on them. I was struck by the similarity of the engine and drivetrain compared to my Dino 246 road car. Despite the 10 years that separated them, and so the feasibility of recreating a Dino Grand Prix car was hatched, I guess. These are archive photos. That's the first one was Phil Hill in the 1960 model. That is Tony Brooks. That's a 59 model. They varied from year to year in all sorts of ways, but they stuck to the original chassis and just kept on modifying, changing the engines around. 1 minute they're going one way, next minute they're angled the next one. Anyhow, there was a lot of information documented, and many photographs of the works cars helped my research. One interesting fact emerged that the team cars were in 3 wheelbases, unlike say Lotuses or Coopers, which were Formula 1, Formula 2, and then Lotus, in the case of Lotus, Formula Junior as well, they were actually basically the same gadget, same size, just different engines. The Ferrari was different. They actually came in 3 different wheelbases, and one of the sizes was actually a Formula 2 car, which is that car there. It's a physically smaller car than the F1 cars. It was only 7 foot in the wheelbase, so very small, very short, as opposed to 7'3" and 7'6" in the full-blown Formula 1 cars that had smaller wheels, being 15-inch instead of 16-inch, and it had the bodywork was different in as much as the tail is much smaller because it didn't carry a fuel tank in the tail. They carried fuel tanks in the panniers on the side, but not in the tail. Hence the tail was a smaller thing, and the whole, it was sometimes pressed into service as a Formula One car on twisty tracks. They put a 2.4 litre engine in it, and actually that's what it's got in there. And if you really, that's a photo actually of on trips at Monaco, something broken, I think. See, looking underneath. But if you look at that photo, you can see how small the car really is compared to the fellow up on the ground. You know, it's quite a tiny car, and that is what I decided to build, because I was just attracted to the extremely compact appearance of it. So yeah, I started to build it from drawings, and there were lots of photographs and everything, and I did a lot of models of it, took photographs of them and compared them to photographs I had of real cars, and I think I built 3 models in all and modified them as well as that, so there are probably 6 different configurations of it, until I got the thing to a point where I was satisfied that it looked exactly the same in a photograph as what my model did. I'd take a photograph of the model in the same stance as a photo of a real car, and then compare the two, and that's how I arrived at the shape of it. Plus I had dimensions, of course, which were quite well known and in books and everything. Anyway, I started to build it, and I got as far as making the butt, which is there, but the chassis is under that butt because it was built on the chassis was already built. I'd done that, and I had the whole thing. That's the frame there in its basic form before the butt was built on it, and then of course the butt was only plaster and wood, and that was destroyed, and I went on and used the chassis. Anyway, with my drawings and plenty of photographs in hand of the chassis and the body butt, I made a trip to the United Kingdom, and I got knocked out to David Clark, who owns Grey Paul Motors, and that was where they kept the JCB Dino, and I was given unfettered access to it. That's actually there. When I got there, it was in pieces, which was good because I could take a lot of photos, do a lot of measuring. I spent all day there, and in fact, whilst I didn't have any full drawings of the thing, I was not out any more than 1/4 of an inch from when I ran the ruler over that car, and which I thought was rather surprising.
I'm not surprised.
And I was actually quite delighted about it, because it was, you can scale photographs and everything else and do it, if you spend enough time and do it accurately, and arrive at a result. Anyway, many of the components I used were fabricated. In fact, that's where John Wright came in. If I hadn't had John to assist me with some of the parts, it probably never would have been built in the way it was. John was quite an amazing fellow, and and still is. I would ring John up and I'd say, John, I want to make parts of a front end and, whatever, wishbones and whatever. And I'd sort of hazily give him a description of what I wanted and give him a photograph. He said, just leave it with me. And sorry, I won't get that.
It's Enzo, I think. Carol wants to know when you're home.
Sorry about that. Might have been the bank manager. Anyway, what did I get to? John actually is amazing. I'd give him photographs, give him a rough, hazy idea of what I wanted, and say, I'll leave it with you, John, and thinking I really didn't give him a lot of information, and I'd be worried in my own brain that what I would get would not be what I'm after, because I didn't give him really that many directions because I didn't know. But anyhow, the bits that come back, they were perfect. John made all the parts for the front end, wishbones, everything. I did the back end. He fabricated things like uprights, and everything else to the original thing. And one of the interesting things he did do for me, we actually used it's got a Dino gearbox in my car, out of the road car, and the reason I used it is because it's the gearbox in the little Formula One car actually was transverse. It's like a transaxle, and which is what the road car has, because it's a transverse engine in the road car. And I had to actually separate. I used the actual engine because at that point in time, as I mentioned, my 246 that I had, that particular one I had at the time, was pulled apart, and I actually used the engine and gearbox out of that. And I actually separated the engine and gearbox because they're in unit in the Dino 2 road car. And I eventually found I couldn't buy a wreck, and that's what I intended to do, get a motor out of a wreck and put it back in the road car, but I couldn't get one. But I did find in the end a brand new engine and gearbox under the bench under a bench at Maranello's in England. I think I paid they rang me up and said, "We found one for you." I said, "Right, I'll have it," because this was after about 9 months. They wanted a whole £13,500 dollars for it, which I you wouldn't even buy the carbies off it for that now. Anyhow, I said, "I'll have it." Didn't really know what I was getting, but when it arrived in a packing crate, it was an absolute complete power pack, gearbox, motor and gearbox, complete with extractors, carburetors, distributor, the whole box and dice.
Ready to go.
Quite amazing, really. But anyway, that's the engine that went back into my road car. Anyway, as the road car used the transverse motor and gearbox, these had to be separated, and the motor was actually turned 80 degrees and dried sump. The motor doesn't sit straight in the car, the motor is actually off on an angle, as in, like this is the way the real one's built, and you're actually not sitting in the centre of the car, you're sitting off to the left-hand side with the drive shaft and everything passing under the right-hand side just beside the seat, and it enters the gearbox on the right-hand side. You can see it if you look in the photograph. There's the gearbox there. There's the diff. There's just here. This has got a transfer case up, and John put this. John Wright. It's got a 80-degree bevel in it, and takes the drop. You can just see the top shaft coming out of there, which went up, and the motor's sitting around on an angle. Rather an interesting sort of thing. But John did all that, and quite a bit of engineering in it. Ray also helped to get it reliable in the end. We've had a few little problems, but anyway, that's all. I couldn't have done it without these gentlemen. That's, I think, the first time I took it out, I think. Amaroo Park in 1982. That'd be right, Barry? Yep. And that's Barry actually sitting in the car there. Barry's already there. Anyway, with these projects, there's a lot of people involved. It's not just me. It's I don't take all. As I said, there's John, Ray, Moss Anglers had some input into it, and solved some of the more complex engineering issues. And it took about 18 months to complete. I was very pleased with the final result. That's Amaroo. And we actually got it sorted out there. It was actually quite a nice little racing car. We did play around with the engine because it was getting clapped, and we pulled it down, and I got a hold of a set of Mancia Stratos, like the rally with full blown rally thing, pistons for it, which were just little single ring things, weren't they, right? Yeah, and Ray did quite a bit of work to it. We put it all back together again, and it went quite a bit harder then, and it actually put out forget what it was, we had on the rolling road, didn't we, at the Tech?
Yeah, we did.
But anyhow, it worked out at that point, and this is before we modified the engine, I think it was about 230 horsepower at the flywheel, wasn't it? They worked it out. But there would have been more than that when we'd finished with it. It might have been down a bit on the factory Grand Prix cars, but of course they probably exaggerated what they put out anyway. And it wasn't, it wouldn't have been that far behind it. And the handling was fine. Once we got it worked out, the brakes were fantastic. It was quite quick. I remember it, I took the thing over to New Zealand on a lot of occasions, and I could race it over there. And Lady Wigram, it was timed at 153 mile an hour, and it was timed at the same speed actually at Orange at one of those new blow demonstrations. And that was actually wound flat out. That was about 7,850 of them. So it was buzzing away. It probably would have gone harder had it been, not that there would have been any point to it. Because that's where you knew you were driving the thing anyway. Remember at Orange it was going from one side of the road to the other. Mind you, I wasn't the only one, because I remember following behind Paul Samuels in a Cooper Climax at the time, and he was dancing around just as much with the camber in the road and what else have you. It made for an exciting time actually. So yeah, but it was raced. The car was raced at times by drivers I consider a great deal more skilled than me. Ray had a go at it at one stage when I wasn't here. I think I was in England, and there was a race meeting actually where it would actually run it, which was at Wakefield Park, and Ray drove it.
And you were aware that he was driving it?
Yeah, I gave it to him to drive. Yeah. So take it away. And he could do a better job than me, I can assure you. And actually Peter Hockwood had a go at it on one occasion, and he was actually quite impressed with it. In fact, I think Les was too. I remember Les had his Dalro there, and I think I had put the thing about second on the grid, hadn't I, or something, but way behind you. Right. Anyhow, Peter wanted to drive it. I said, Leo, you could do a better job than me. And he'd never driven it. And I think we went and talked to the car clerk of the course, I think it was Charlie at the time, and he said, oh yeah, he can have a go, and Pete's all right. And then we said, oh, can I go around in the warm-up lap, and can I hang back and then gun it? I just want to get a feel of how it goes. And Charlie said, yeah, that'll be all okay. So he did one lap in it, and I guess about half a lap of that was flat out, the rest was slowing up and everything else, and just sort of got a bit of a feel for it and whatever have you. And anyway, when the flag dropped, I think even Les was shocked. I think we went up, he drove it a lot harder than what I could drive it. He went up, I remember up the back straight at Wakefield Park and around the top twisty bit, and all of a sudden he was along the inside of Les, and next minute he was away and gone like a bloody dart. The thing would go if it had the right person behind the wheel, that's for sure. Actually, you know, John Surtees drove the car at one stage at Amaroo Park in a demonstration, and he commented favourably on it, and to me that was a real compliment. As a replica, of course, the car couldn't run to any degree in the historics in Australia, but I did compete in, I think I took it over there about 5 times in all, to New Zealand, and we were also ran in quite a few non-cams events here. Also took it, were invited, as was Scott this time, down to LGP. We were invited, I think, twice to Adelaide and once to Melbourne with it, which was good. And I owned that car for about 20 years and enjoyed the experience. And I am very pleased to say that I hope it gave a lot of pleasure to other people. People told me it did, so I think Peter had a driver as well. And
there's just one thing about that always fascinated me. You let me drive the car one time for a test with Racing Car News, and then another time, some 20 years later, I drove it again. And on both occasions I akin it to it was automatic voyeurism, in the sense that it was rather like watching somebody dance with your wife. Because you got so excited about it.
I'll tell Carol when I get home. Yeah. Anyway, that was we sold the car, and that was that. So anyway, we now move on to my second Ferrari replica, which I'll better firstly give it a little bit of history. It was a Dino 206S, and it was actually conceived by the factory in 1965, originally as the 166P, and they had a 1.6 litre, basically, well, what is now a road Dino engine, modified, you know. And there was going to be a small run of 50. And they were going to use them in some form of production car racing up against things like factory Porsche 911s, which were taking everything, and actually I think the 904 and 906 Porsches were derivatives that would have run up against. However, there was severe industrial problems in Italy at the time, and there was a year's delay that was incurred. And by the time the production restarted, they were old hat, and they only ever built 16 of them. So they were never ever considered a frontline thing. They were going to be sold to customers. None of that ever happened. The cars did get sold, but in the end, a lot of them wound up with Formula 2 motors in them, which were like a much better type of same basic thing, but multi-valve. What else have you? That's actually a photo there, I think, of Mike Parks in the prototype. I think Spencer gave me that photograph actually when he knew I was building it. Anyway, yeah, and that's another one of Mike Parks in the Dino that belonged to Maranello Concessions. That's another one of, I think, Scarfield, I think. That's, not too sure. But anyway, they're just archival photographs of Dino 206Ss. It really started as a project, as a collaboration with a fellow Ferrari club member, Jerry Diverster, who also was, and maybe still is, I don't know, a member of the HSRCA. Jerry had a passion for the Ferrari 206 and actually wanted me to build him one. And anyhow, in the end it developed into a thing where we were going to build two of them, and I'd do the bodywork, he was going to do the mechanical. But anyway, I soon realised that the project was, you know, a fair old thing, much more work than building an open wheeler. And again, I started it by taking a trip to the UK to study a car, and that actually John Dabbs, who was Nick Mason's right-hand man, I was given an introduction to John when he was out here. He actually came out one night, he was with Freddie Vogel, and rang up and wanted to come out and see my little GP car, which he came and saw. He stayed there half the night talking and said if I ever want to do another project, he could help me. In Ringside, I got in contact with him because I knew Nick Mason had a 206S, and it was all arranged and off we went. But by the time we got there, the car had actually been sold to America. But that actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because whilst it was a beautiful car, the one that Nick had, it wasn't original in as much as it had been bashed, crashed, burnt, and everything else had been re-chassied, been rebodied, and to the
mirrors were okay.
Well, yeah, to the naked eye, it looked dead original and kosher. But when you really look, after seeing photographs of it, after I looked at the one that I did look at, which actually John Dabbs arranged it. It was owned by Rob Slamplow in England. I went and saw that one. That car had never been touched with a paddle beater's hammer or anything. It was knocked about, but mechanically perfect, but a bit of a rugged gadget when you looked at it. But I was lucky because it was totally original, whereas Nick Mason's wasn't. So it would have made a better. That's Rob Blandau's car there, and that's there's a few photographs here which I show the way we actually took the shape of it, arrived at the shape. If you we made this gadget here, and that actually took the body profile. I mean, there's a lot more to it than that, but it actually is, perhaps it may be of interest to people who want to, the process is a very good process for profiling something, copying it. From that, I'd say the body that we wound up making would have been absolutely dead accurate, much more accurate than the original, because actually when we started to run the ruler, the thing was out 3/8 of an inch side to side at least, covered in dents as well. But as a matter of fact, interestingly, on one of the shots there, you would have seen the back of it. There's about 14, I forget how many little louvers right there, that photo there. Now, that's the original car, of course, but if you actually count the louvers, there's one more on one side than the other. They didn't worry too much. They just bashed holes in them. It was quite amazing, but you can see there the fit of the bonnet is fairly rugged, and also the engine cover, I should say, and you can see that it's dented. But the good thing about it was absolutely original. It had never been touched. And it was just a perfect thing to measure. Plus, he wasn't worried about us dragging things over the paintwork. I said, oh look, we'll take good care of it. Don't worry about it, son. Doesn't matter. They didn't care. So it was great, But we spent about a week there measuring it and drawing the chassis and everything else. And then came home with all these, well, I shouldn't say we drew the chassis there, we didn't. We took countless measurements and made sketches in a book and brought the whole thing back together with all these profiles. And actually we then drew the thing up because we had all the body, these are profiles we took off the thing when we were in England. And of course the chassis, you could see everywhere where that chassis fitted within those profiles, and we just had to make all the measurements suit. So the chassis would have been dead accurate as well in the end. The only thing with our body, it was even both sides.
That's not original, then?
No, maybe not original. But it is an interesting thing. If anyone wants to ask me how it's all done, there are lessons to be learned, I guess, in the construction of moulds and how to copy something, which may come in handy for someone who's storing something. Anyway, the body and chassis were built directly from the plans that I prepared following my visit, and these are photos of the various stages when we were building. There's the frame, of course, on the top right hand side. That's the actual body that's been fitted to the frame. That's put it on there, all the various shots. The wheels were all cast and spun. Actually, John Wright made the patterns for the wheel centres. They weren't the wheels, whereas the original wheels are mag. I actually made a three-piece wheel, like a composite wheel. John made the patterns for the centre. They were all cast in aircraft aluminium or whatever. Bruce actually spun the rims. So they're a split rim and they're bolted together from the back, so you could use the same centre, front and back, but with different rim widths the car had. But they look exactly the same. The only difference being the original wheels had spline drive, and this side we did a peg drive. So they're still lock on, but peg drive wheels. So that's one place they differ. That's another photograph of the thing when it's in its rough state. The uprights again are attributed to John. He did all that. I think he did some of the work on fitting the inboard disc brakes to it. Well, that's a Renault R30 actually, transaxle, which is probably one mistake I made. If I went back and did it, I wouldn't do that again. But anyway, that's as it may be. Both Moss Anglers, John Wright, Bruce Laird, were all involved in assisting, and Ray, with their specialised skill and such the car was built. There are all photos of it, not quite completed, but getting close to it. But even things down to the pedal boxes and everything else, they're all a dead set, while they're fabricated, they're a dead set copy of all the original. So the whole thing is fairly close to what it should be. And including the motor actually, which is was originally a 2-litre engine, which was sourced from all engine bits all over the world, because they're now becoming rather difficult to get hold of, though they were then too. I couldn't get a complete motor. I found a lot of bits, had to assemble it. Anyway, after about 6 years the project was completed, and again many of my old friends in the centre assisted in the project. That's photos of the car when it was finished. Yeah, another photo of it. Anyhow, the car went to the AGP in Melbourne one stage, because we were invited to take it down there, and Mossy drove it. Actually, it also competed in other events in Wakefield, but mainly in regularity, but that's, the way it worked out. Mossy drove it most of the time. That's Mossy in it down at AGP. I found the thing rather nervous to drive actually, but Mossy had no trouble in it, and perhaps that's a measure of his skill as opposed to mine.
You bloody used it.
Yeah, it is a pretty car actually. It's a beautiful little thing.
Very pretty.
Anyhow, after about 4 years, I sold it on to a fellow HSRCA member, and I think he has just resold the thing. I'm not too sure. That's a photo of Moss.
Gone to Aaron Lewis's brother.
It's gone, has it?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I know he was looking at it, did he? Yeah. But anyway, that's another photo taken at a Ferrari day. To me, they were a great lot of fun. I got a great buzz out of building them. I suppose I got a great buzz out of people who told me that it couldn't be done, or that why would you want to do it, so I did it, and I wound up on a good tour. Maybe that's something about my sanity. No, I had a great, that was a great thing. That's actually a photo of Carol and I, taken I think at Alphabet Car Club Day, I think at Eastern Creek, yes. I must pay tribute to Carol. I wouldn't have done all this without her acquiescence. And I can always remember somebody saying, your father, to my son, who was actually here tonight, Cameron, he's over there. He said to Cameron, somebody that I know, I forget who it was, said, what's it like to have your dad at home and retired? And he said, well, I don't know. He hasn't retired really. He's just gone to work in the garage. So I suppose I was down there for about 6 years, toiling away at these things. So Carol's forbearance was something to behold. So, and she supported me with all the various projects. So that's really something. And I must thank her really. That about finishes my involvement with cars at the time, and I then turned my attention to building scale radio-controlled boats, Manly ferries in particular, which I still have. Got a model of the South Stone, which is a steamer, which is fully working, about 7 foot long, with a gas-fired steam engine. It's a lot of fun. We've got a few others as well. I had a great time with them. However, my interest in cars was sort of recently rekindled by my daughter and her enthusiasm for all things MGB, to be quite honest. Surprisingly, we once owned an MGB and I never thought a great deal about it. It was a beautiful car. I always remember Linda came to me about, I don't know what, 10 years ago, Linda, something like that, and said to me, I never forgive you for selling that MGB. I used to love that car. I don't know what she loved about it, but anyhow, she loved it. And anyway, she then says to me, I think I'd like to buy one. And everything else I said, you wouldn't want to touch one. I said, you want too much trouble, and I could see I'd be looking after that. Anyhow, she talked me into going and looking at one. And it was a beaut car, and there was a lot of money spent on it, so in the end I finished up buying it, and I wound up with it, and somehow I don't know, got bitten by some sort of strange disease, and I actually bought a GT as well at auction, and I've just finished restoring that, and I've been having a lot of fun and making a lot of calls to Bruce Smith. Yeah, then of course Ray Kenny actually thanked me a lot because he could see what I was doing and went out and bought one.
Whose fault was that, Sam? Whose bloody fault was that?
Yeah, so as you can see, he's thanking me. So
Never thanks anybody.
anyhow, Bruce is thanking him. Well, I guess that brings us to the present. I have my little talk has been of some interest to you. So.
Absolutely. 16 has been wonderful and very entertaining and given you a tough start to life with your vision impairment. You've certainly been quite an inspiration to us all. You've done very well. Thank you. And also I'd like to thank Bruce Laird, Grant Furzer for coming along, for Barry Clark for all the good work here, and for our resident roadies, Dave Williamson and Brian Caldersmith for all their work. It's wonderful seeing such a good crowd here tonight, and we'll do it again soon.
I must admit, I'm amazed at what I would consider my peers that are all here tonight. So,
Well, you're worth it, mate. You've done a great job.
I'm just checking on the numbers.
Make sure you get your number.
Put your ticket in. Look, make sure you get
What do I get, just one go?
Just
there.
55B.
Yellow.
It's got no name on it, so I claim that. Oh, it's yellow. Oh, Bruce, this is worth a discount.